This is bluster by Donald Trump, but the reality is that at the end of the day, he can do it because we've got an idiot for a leader in an administration or a group of people, a government in Canada that's on its way out. He's just poking fun at them. They've really they've they've pushed the envelope. They've hurt people, and their policies have done nothing but injure the country and imperil our future. And when you do something like that, there is no reprieve from that. You are going to face defeat. I've said with other people, Stephen LeDrew, with Mark Keeley, who used to work with John Turner many
Oh,
years
I know
ago.
Mark. Yeah, he's a
Yeah.
good friend of the family.
Oh, wow, small
Like
world.
my parents. Yeah, my parents. Yeah. My mom
We did
actually
a
went to
little,
school with him. So,
we did a little thing with Mark. I've known Mark for a long time, but we did a thing with him back with at the National Club. Be it resolved, the Liberal Party is dead. And I took the position that it was. Unless it changes itself and will morph into likely an alliance with the NDP down the road, the party is no longer a viable fighter at the center. It doesn't matter who they bring out as, which is the other point I would make about Carney and others. It doesn't matter who you bring out as the best name since sliced bread. You're still going to lose. The public is finished with you. They're over.
yeah.
They're hurting, and they want revenge. They smell blood, but they also want to lick back. Many of them are
Yeah.
disappointed Trudeau didn't run, but they still want to punish the Liberal Party. And these people are basically just biding time, whether it's 3 months or whether it's 6 months. TikTok, one way or another, it's over. What I think is going to happen, by the way, and here's what you need to know. Mark my words on this one. We're not going to get a tariff on the 1st of February. We're going to get a promise to begin tariffs, which probably won't kick in for several months. Part of this is not just bluster from Trump. It's also Trump recognizing that there will be a new government, and when there is a new government, a little bit more of an approach that isn't as bizarre and as crazy as the current administration or the current arrangement we have in Canada.
Well, and no doubt, behind the scenes, you'll have Jamil Javani, who obviously is speaking with Pierre Poilievre, who is speaking with JD Vance, and who is, kind of orchestrating the strategy behind the scenes. And yeah, no doubt that is communicated that this is what happens if you do this. So if you take a longer term approach, then that's going to allow us to make our moves and to get in. And then I think all of a sudden, once the Conservative government's in, oh well, there's going to be no more threats of tariffs. So
Yeah, I think that's going to make a big impact, and I think we're probably better aligned with them. But I think there's also some of the reality that they can convey that most people now would probably not be aware of. I told this to Ben Mulroney this morning on one of the stations. I said, for Trump to come out and say he doesn't need Canadian oil, crazy. You know why?
yeah,
What is it in the United States? Why do they buy our oil? Not just because they don't produce enough of their own. They consume 21 million barrels of oil a day, but they can only produce 13.2, and that's maximum fracking. They've hit that no one believes they can go anything. At this point, they're starting to see their wells decline. The one thing that above that, so they're short 7 million barrels, of which Canada provides 4.4 million. So almost half of that gap is filled. But it's not just that 4.4. It's that what that 4.4 or most of it represents is heavy oil. You can't produce diesel to run your manufacturing, to run your transport infrastructure, to run your military, to run your agriculture without diesel. Light, tight shale oil produces gasoline, but it doesn't have what's called the API low enough, the dense enough to be able to make good diesel. That's why they need Canadian oil. And so, like it or not, and they're not getting it from Russia. They're definitely not getting it from Iran. Saudi Arabia isn't interested because their market is in China and India. And they're not getting it from Venezuela. They're about to sanction dramatically next week. So anybody who thinks that Canada's crazy, and this is why Danielle Smith has got the ace, up her sleeve, because she knows the Americans need her, and she's willing to work with them, not just to get that oil continued and without tariff.
to
She thinks
increase
she
it.
can double it,
Yeah.
and I think she can. If the Keystone XL gets built, or they permit greater pressure on both sides of the existing pipelines, you can increase that to 6 million barrels a day. Now think about that. An extra 2 million barrels a day at $75 a barrel. It's $150 million a day extra economic
per
activity
day.
that buys a stronger Canadian dollar. Canadian dollar drops from 144 pennies by US dollar down to $120. More revenue for the federal, provincial, and municipal governments. Poilievre, I think, has got this figured out, and most of us have. And it's like my time as a member of parliament, as a liberal, I really cared about gasoline. I never knew about the upstream because I didn't care they were doing the good job. But I tell you this one story that you might find interesting. When I came out with my gas report in 1998, the Liberal Committee on Gasoline Pricing, Chrétien and Martin both pulled me aside separately and said, "What the hell are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm going after the competition issue in gasoline." And they both looked relieved when I said each individually. I said, "Well, why?" And Chrétien didn't quite tell me. Martin did. He said, "Yeah, Dan." He said, "I need that oil sector to go from 1 million to 2 million barrels a day to pay down the debt." And it did. He said, but from 1996 until 2003, Canada went from 1.1 million barrels a day to 2.7 million barrels a day. And with that extra revenue, he had more revenue to pay down the debt. It's also allowed us to pay down things like the first rebates that Canadians received on fuel, thanks to Dan McTeague way back in 2000 and 2003. Jason fought me on this, Jason Kenney. But ultimately, it's important to recognize just how significant we're a resource-based economy. Americans can talk a lot about lumber and things like that, but we have way more than they do. And they've already tariffed us to the nth degree. This is bluster by Donald Trump, but the reality is that at the end of the day, he can do it because we've got an idiot for a leader in an administration or a group of people, a government in Canada that's on its way out. He's just poking fun at them and giving a good kick as they wind up at the, in the proverbial political gutter. And the sooner they're out, the better. And I think he'll smarten up once that happens too, because we'll have a government with a true mandate that'll be able to right the ship, as it were. I have every confidence in Pierre Poilievre. I just hope that he goes one step further and goes after net zero, because it's not just about carbon taxes.
So when you were in Parliament, Pierre was also in Parliament. Did you get to work with him very often, or like?
I
what do you
did.
think
I
of him as
debated him a few times, and the question was asked to me. Roy Green did it a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to miss him. He said, "Did you win?" I said, "Definitely not." I said, "I don't think I lost. It was a split decision, but I tried everything under the sun to beat that guy, and I couldn't. And he could have probably gone up. Had it been today, he would have destroyed me." He's extraordinarily good and very gifted, and he does it in both languages. I'm bilingual, but I'm shocked at how bilingual he has become. So this guy's ready for a battle, and I know that that's the biggest fear liberals have. He is going to clean Mark Carney's clock in a debate, the likes of which I don't think we've ever seen. He's going to run over this and steamroller him. I know it's going to happen. It's over before it begins, and Carney knows that. And it doesn't matter how much grift you have out there. Mark Carney is a banker. You have to know that when a country's in as much economic debt as we are, he's got no room in order to buy people off, even with his ideas of universal basic income, which can't be done, can't be rolled out unless the country is truly in the hole, and for which you can continue to borrow money, watch your credit rating drop, and watch interest rates go through the roof, because you don't care if people own their own homes or not. They should all live in tenanted apartments, as we did in the old Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's it's a dark alternative if the Liberals somehow win, but
I don't think they will. Like some of the polls that are coming out now, like this week, they've been taken within the past week. So you can see that people, other than the Ecos poll, which I don't really put too much faith in, you can see that Canadians don't want a Liberal.
Well, there's no
care.
change.
I can tell you, I felt 2011, I think we were in trouble. I didn't think I was personally in trouble. That's why I only lost by 900 votes, but it was enough to cause me to think. Back that time, people could scurry over the NDP, but they, that too is a foregone conclusion. People cannot go there because it'll just represent more of the same. So other than the true grifters, and they will always be out there, you got 40 million people in this country, surely you could buy a couple thousand. It's over about the vote taking, which is what they're doing everything in their power not to get to that vote. And that's why the next step will be, hey, let's look at these tariffs, which aren't going to be as bad. I mean, Trump's people know that if they do, here's a guillotine on February 1st, you have to have yourself ready for these tariffs. He's not going to do it overnight. He wants to give enough time for the Liberals to be shown the door, and shown the door they will. My only point now is, and I stay with this, doesn't matter who the leader is, the Liberal Party will not return, at least for several decades, and I think several elections, I should say. very much the same way the provincial Liberals are done and did themselves in way back in 2015 to
Yeah, they can't
2017.
get any traction at all anymore.
Yeah.
No, I mean they just brought on Crombie, and there's if the Conservatives, well, they did just call the election, they're still slated to win a majority. Like, it's insane.
Well, I'm not a big fan of Dougie's, you got from the outset, but Crombie, give me a
No,
break. What is that?
no,
That's just
neither are we.
She was a backbencher and was elected in '08, same time Trudeau was, and she was such a ditz. I mean, honest to God, and my
She's very
campaign
woke.
manager worked for her. My campaign manager worked for her as his assistant, and he just rolled his eyes and said it's all about image and the latest, the latest cosmetic surgery. That's all it was. And if that's what people are given to, that's great. Spend your time, at square one and vote based on how people look. But if it's come down to that, then we do have a big problem in this country, in which image rather than substance is leading to a country that is falling over the cliff. And we're there. I mean, look, there's no doubt. No one can find jobs. It's dead out there. Everything we've touched has turned to garbage. EV mandates, carbon taxes. I mean, I talk about now you want to involve people with forcing them to pay capital gains when you haven't even passed it through Parliament. That's illegal.
Yeah, did you hear that the Canadian Taxpayers Federation just launched
Launching a
legal
court
action
challenge.
against them?
Oh, did they? No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, they announced it
Yeah,
I know
they just
Franco and
announced
those
it.
guys, well, it's a good move, but it's gonna. I mean, this is what we're going to spend our time next few years. And even when Pierre gets to power, he's got two problems. And I alluded to them. Municipalities, where the federal Liberals have given $2 billion in terms of the Green Municipal Fund, and a stacked Senate. My advice to the Conservatives is go to those senators who are, 73, 74, who are Liberals. They've been there for 5, 6 years, and offer them a nice sinecure somewhere, because they're at 75, they're gone. This way you get rid of it. You can get 30 of these people back, and then you got a Senate that won't be blocking any legislation.
Well, we've been the other thing to consider is that if they really want to block some of the legislation that is in the strong mandate by the Conservatives, the next thing that you're going to hear is an uproar from the Canadian people to abolish the Senate, because they're going to say, listen, we voted for this, get the hell out of the way. So
I'd like to do that, but this is Charlottetown 2.0. It's going to take unanimity. You need to get all the provinces on side. It's not 7-10. The amending formula only, but it comes to composition institutions. I mean, I used to get pissed off. I had the second largest riding in the country when I was elected in 1993. It's called Ontario riding, by the way, so Pickering, Ajax, Whitby. And I had 10 times more constituents than riding in Malpeque in PEI. Bigger in size and bigger in population, tenfold. My budget never reflected that, and I was dying. I couldn't service that 240,000 people without making some really dumb mistakes. And so to amend that would be almost, and that's constitutional. The 4 senators from PEI, the 4 MPs from PEI. If it's based on numbers alone, there'd be 1 MP and 1 senator, and that's it. But you can't. And some have tried, and basically we've come up against that bloody amending formula, which requires unanimity and 2/3 consent. So I don't know how you're going to do it. Same way that Meech Lake died because one MLA, who later became an MP with me, what was his name? Out of Manitoba. Oh, I can't think of his name now. I can see his face. He sat 3 away from me in the house. Elijah Harper took his quill, his plumage, and got up, and it was unanimous in the legislature. He didn't like it. He said no, and because he said no, the legislation failed in Manitoba, which didn't give me unanimity to make the changes that were required in the Charlottetown Accord. So, Charlottetown and Meech Lake Accord. So all this is great, but the way you get around the Senate, it's got to be practical. You got to try to find a way to give the guys something else so they get the hell out of the way, and you create the vacancies, or you do what Mulroney did, and you do a temporary move to increase his number to say 200 members in the Senate. That way you appoint enough Conservatives, get your legislation through, and then they die after a year. I don't know how it's going to be done. I can only say from experience, these are some of the things that were done in the past and could still happen in the future. But the other thing I've given advice to the Conservatives, not that they would listen to it, what are you going to do with 240 MPs? They're going to be restless. David and I have talked about this. So what you do is you do what they did for guys like Dan McTeague. Go ahead. You got a good idea? Get a private members bill. Get 5 of them. Pass them. Then that kept me preoccupied. And yeah, I passed them. High speed pursuit, organ donation, competition act. I had so much fun and media and work and recognition of the riding. I didn't give a darn where the Liberal Party was. I mean, I was too preoccupied with my own stuff. I said, this is how you keep them busy, folks. Give them that chance, and they'll stay away from deviating you from your work. Not all wisdom is new wisdom.
Well, and the devil finds work for idle hands, right? That's the thing.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. And it would have. I mean, a lot of MPs they got one term, that's it, and they're out. So how are they going to identify and win over the support of those 10% of 15% of people who vote based on the work of their MP? Right now, it's a monolith. As I said, no one gets anything done. You can't speak for yourself. You can't think for yourself. You can't write legislation for yourself. But Poilievre can change that. He can provide a safety valve that'll keep his government going a lot longer than I think he expects. And he has me as an example because I told him, I said, I voted against my party 140 times. It was funny in that debate. One of the guys came up, Jack Siegel, and said, oh, there is a member of parliament who's voted against his party more often than any other Liberal MP in history. Stephen LeDrew said, who's that? And he said, oh, it's Nate Erskine Smith. And I started laughing and everybody noticed it. And then LeDrew said, well, you're next to Dan McTeague, who did it 140 times. So I don't think Nate's numbers exactly equate Dan McTeague. But I was never thrown out of the party because a lot of the times, half of what I was doing was the right thing. And I had a lot of people supporting me saying, yeah, we kind of like your position because that's reflective of some of the values we have in this country. I'm not afraid to say that because it's important. The record's still held by me, and I'm not going to deviate from that as long as we have a system which basically says members of parliament, nobody's 50 feet within the House of Commons.